Baruch Spinoza approached the universe as a geometric equation to be solved. He rejected the premise that reality is a divine mystery demanding human worship. By trade, he was a lens grinder living in 17th century Amsterdam. Every day, he worked to eliminate physical distortions from glass. This demand for absolute, unclouded clarity became the exact model for his intellectual approach to reality. Crafting a lens required strict adherence to mechanical reality. You can see the rigorous apparatus here. He translated this precision into philosophy using the synthetic method, a logical framework modeled on Euclid's geometry that builds arguments step by step from foundational definitions to propositions. To grasp Spinoza's system, you have to leave your ego at the door. You have to discard the desire for a personal God who cares about human affairs and prepare to examine a mathematically cold, indifferent universe. The consequence of applying this ruthless logic to theology was severe. On July 27, 1656, the Sephardic Jewish community of Amsterdam issued Spinoza a herem, the harshest writ of excommunication possible, for what they called abominable heresies. The root of this heresy was his definition of the divine. Spinoza argued that God possesses no personality, makes no choices, and holds no providential plan for humanity. He later weaponized this exact argument in a book called The Theological Political Treatise. In it, he used his impersonal view of God to argue against ecclesiastical power, advocating instead for a secular state and absolute freedom to philosophize. The book was printed anonymously in secrecy to bypass religious authorities and was quickly condemned. One critic famously described it as a book forged in hell by the devil himself. Spinoza's geometric proofs did actual political work. By dismantling the traditional theology of a judging, intervening creator, he laid the intellectual groundwork for modern secularism. The bedrock of Spinoza's entire system is substance monism. Substance monism is the metaphysical doctrine that there is exactly one infinite, self-caused, and necessarily existing substance in the universe. This directly contradicted the prevailing science of his time, specifically Cartesian dualism. Cartesian dualism is the theory proposed by René Descartes that reality is divided into two distinct substances, physical matter and immaterial mind. Spinoza argued that dividing reality this way is logically impossible. He also dismantled classical theism. Classical theism posits a creator who exists independently of and prior to the physical universe. Spinoza demonstrated that an infinite substance must contain everything. Therefore, it is impossible for a creator to sit outside of or remain ontologically separate from its creation. A God without a personal will, preferences, or a grand design casts no shadow. It is a blind, unthinking totality that simply exists. He captured this totality in a three-word phrase, Deus sive Natura, God or nature. These are not two different concepts, but identical terms for the exact same unified system. Because this system operates by strict necessity, there is no teleology. Teleology is the philosophical explanation of phenomena by the purpose they serve, or final causes. It does not design the weather or the harvest of crops or the planetary orbits for human benefit. Attributing human-like intentions to God is a superstition. It is a psychological coping mechanism born of our need to feel important in a vast, indifferent universe. Spinoza maps the structure of this universe by dividing nature into two aspects. The first is Natura naturans, or naturing nature. This is the active, productive engine of reality, God and his infinite power. This infinite power expresses itself through attributes. An attribute is a fundamental, infinite essence or way of being that constitutes the single substance. While God possesses an infinite number of these attributes, the human intellect is equipped to perceive only two of them: thought, which encompasses the mental realm, and extension, which encompasses physical matter. The second aspect of Spinoza's universe is natura naturata, or natured nature. These are the passive, produced results that follow necessarily from the laws of the attributes. The specific individual things that make up natura naturata are called modes. A mode is a temporary, finite modification of one of God's attributes. Every human mind is merely a finite mode of the attribute of thought. Every physical human body is merely a finite mode of the attribute of extension. Because mind and body are just two different expressions of the exact same underlying substance, they do not causally interact. This is known as causal parallelism. When a physical body moves, the corresponding idea in the mind shifts in perfect mirrored synchronization, without one causing the other. This metaphysical structure has immediate consequences for human psychology. The absolute unbreakable determinism that governs planetary orbits and colliding objects applies with equal force to our internal choices. Free will is a cognitive delusion. It occurs simply because we are conscious of our desires and actions, but completely ignorant of the prior chain of causes that compelled us to act. Every entity is driven by a principle Spinoza calls conatus. Conatus is the innate existential inertia, or striving, of a thing to persevere in its own being and resist destruction. Conatus forms the bedrock of all human emotions. When an external force increases our power to persevere, we experience joy. When an external force decreases that power, we experience sadness. Spinoza divides these emotional states into two categories. Passions are passive affects, caused by external forces acting upon us. Actions are active affects, generated by our own internal understanding and adequate knowledge. A life dominated by the passions is what Spinoza calls human bondage. It is the pathetic state of being endlessly tossed around by external causes, enslaved by hopes, fears, and the pursuit of fleeting external objects. Because we are deterministic biological machines embedded in an unbroken causal chain, true freedom cannot mean the ability to magically defy the laws of physics and choose otherwise. To escape human bondage, we have to rely on a specific cognitive tool: adequate ideas. An adequate idea is a clear, distinct concept formed by reason that accurately reflects the true essence and causal history of a thing. Instead of relying on random sensory experience, adequate ideas map the deterministic chain of causes governing existence. When you understand a painful event is mathematically necessary, that it could not have happened another way, its emotional grip on you weakens. This is the core of Spinoza's ethics of reason. By aligning our conatus with a logical understanding of nature, we transform ourselves from passive victims of circumstance into active, autonomous participants in reality. Freedom in Spinoza's universe is not doing whatever you want. It is the profound autonomy of understanding exactly why things must be as they are, eliminating the suffering caused by wishing they were different. The final result of this journey is a state Spinoza calls the intellectual love of God. This is not religious worship. It contains no awe and requires no submission to creators. Instead, it is a profound state of intellectual blessedness and stable peace of mind. You achieve this by viewing reality sub specie aeternitatis, meaning under the aspect of eternity. This requires abstracting your view of the world away from time, place, and personal ego. When you observe the universe from this eternal, objective perspective, you eliminate the irrational fluctuations of hope, fear, and even the anxiety over death. You see only the necessary flow of reality. It all comes back to the lens grinder's demand for clarity. The highest goal of philosophy is to polish the mind until the mechanics of the universe become perfectly transparent. True salvation is reached only when you comprehend the mathematical necessity of all things. You accept that the universe simply is, and in that acceptance you secure absolute